Good evening, everyone, and Assalamualaikum. My name is Danea Binti Ahmad, and I'll be exploring the differences between General British GB and General American GA accents. So, before we start with our presentation, here is a fun fact. According to Devlin, there are a few of major accents found in the United States, which are the main accent, New England English, Pacific Northwest English, California English, Midwestern American English, Southern American English, Hawaii English, New Orleans and Cajun English, East Coast cities dialects such as Boston and New York, and High Tides. As for the accents found in the UK, United Kingdom, there are about 9 of them, and they are Cockney, RP, received pronunciation, Scouse, Geordie, Brummie, West Country English, Scottish, Welsh, and Northern Irish. So, today we'll dive into variations in pronunciation, including consonants, vowels, stress, intonation, and rhythm. And we'll also try to understand how these differences influence communication. So, this is the audio or video that I have found in order to successfully execute this assignment of mine. The first question, which is the transcription analysis. So the main differences lie in vowel sounds and the pronunciation of the r sound. So this is the excerpt, as you can see, and try to compare the pronunciation of words between GB and GA. I'll play the video now.
Car,
color,
color, theater, schedule, neighbor, past, center,
humor,
Saturday.
Saturday,
In the US, we would say tomato,
tomato,
water,
As you can see just now, there was some of the example of words that highlight these differences, such as color, water, schedule or schedule, car, and tomato or tomato. So, moving on to the next slide, the types of variation. So the first one is systemic variation. As you can see, systemic variation, it refers to the differences in the phoneme inventory. So for example, in General American, the r sound is rhotic, means that it is realized and pronounced in words like car and butter. However, in General British, the r is non-rhotic, so it is not realized, it is silent, and it is ignored. So the pronunciation would be somewhat like this. Instead of car, it will be car. Instead of butter, it will be butter. Moving on to the distributional variation. So this type of variation refers to the occurrence of phonemes in different positions. For instance, the vowel in tomato is pronounced as U in General British. It's like instead of it being tomato, it will be tomato. However, in General American, we must note that the way they pronounce this specific word is slightly softer than how the British people would pronounce it. So they would say something like this, tomato. Another example is the vowel in water. In General American, it often has a rhotic sound. So basically, it will be water. While in General British, it's pronounced as uh, so it will be water. Right, so the second last is lexical variation. This refers to the differences in vocabulary. So words like color and color and color are used in General British And General American, of course. However, General American, they usually prefers the spelling of color to be without the U. However, General British would prefer the spelling to be with the U. So this plays an important role, especially in terms of lexical variation. Similarly, the word theater in GB is pronounced differently and spelled with the RE at the end, while in GA it's theater with the ER instead of RE. So lastly, we'll look at the realizational variation. So this variation, it involves differences in how the same sounds are realized. So for example, in General American, the word schedule is pronounced with the sk sound, whereas in General British, it's pronounced with the sh, as in sh. So in General American, it will be schedule. However, in General British, it will be schedule. So we'll look at the pronunciation features now. In this section, we will analyze pronunciation features like consonants, vowels, stress, intonation, and rhythms. So let's look at the consonants first. General British, the r sound is typically non-rhotic, means that it is not realized at the end of words. So for example, car is pronounced as car, and butter is pronounced as butter. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that R would be under non-rhotic, where it is not realized at the end of the word unless in the word the r sound is followed by a vowel. So, for example, as I've given there, such as the word miracle. So the R is realized. Meanwhile, for General American, the r sound is rhotic. So it's pronounced even at the end of words like car, butter. Let's move on to the vowels. So General British, in words like pass, the vowel is pronounced as so it'll be pass. However, in General American, in the same word, pass is pronounced with the a, so it'll be pass. This can be the same case for tomato and tomato. So the British pronunciation uses as in tomato. However, the Americans would use tomato. Okay, well, let's move on to the stress next. So let's look at the lexical stress first. Stress patterns may differ, as seen in adult, where General American may stress the first syllable, while General British may stress the second syllables. So in General American, it will be adult, while in General British, it will be adult, adult, adult. As for the sentence stress, General American often places more emphasis on content words. General American, they would usually focus on the content words. You will find the words that must be highlighted in a sentence, and they would emphasize on these words, these targeted words. While General British, they would also emphasize function words such as to and the. So there will be more fluctuations tones, means that it will be more rhythmic and you would see more pitch contour. Let's move on to the intonation. So General British uses more falling intonation for statements. Let's look at the video to be more clear.
Anyway, yeah, the Americans love the British accent, but British don't really like the American accent.
The American accent. If you observe it properly, then you would see that the intonation actually went down. So let's move on to the General American. So Basically, for intonation, general American, they often uses rising intonations even in statements, which can sometimes sound like a question. So it'll be something like this.
Okay, so today we compared British accent and accent from the USA.
USA. So it might sound like a question to non-native speakers. So basically, it would sound someone like this. Is that yours? Last part is rhythm. So for general British, GB is stress timed but has more rhythm. So basically, it is more musical. It has more pronounced pauses and intonation, while general American is it is more smoother and has a more neutral rhythm with less emphasis on individual syllables and less pronounced pauses. So let's look at the video to be more clear.
But in the UK, you have Scottish is completely different from mine.
Right.
And the same thing in the US.
Oh, this A sound is going to be really strong.
Okay.
So yeah, like I said, general American speakers, they would say something with a smoother tone, so there wouldn't be any pronounced pauses. Whereas general British, you would see that they pause at certain points while they are talking, and this creates a more rhythmic speech. This is my last slide, the influence on meaning, communication, and perception. So, to conclude, beyond just pronunciation, these accent differences influence how meaning is understood, how effectively people communicate, and how they are perceived by others, how they are looked at by others. So, for example, differences in vowel or consonant pronunciation like schedule and schedule, or tomato and tomato, may cause brief confusion. So, especially for non native speakers, this can affect the clarity of communication in global context. Now imagine if you're not from the UK, but you're talking to someone that is from the UK and they pronounce schedule, as you always hear it, as schedule. Wouldn't that actually might cause you to be taken aback for a bit? Right, so the stress and intonation also play a role. Rising intonation in American English may sound more questioning or friendly, so it will sound more approachable, while British English's falling intonation might come across as more formal or reserved. These subtle cues influence the listener's perception of the speaker's confidence, politeness, or intent. So, moreover, accents carry social meanings. A British received pronunciation accent may be seen as educated or upper class, while a general American accent might be viewed as approachable or mainstream. So, these perceptions can affect everything from job interviews to international collaborations. So, understanding these variations is not just about linguistics. It actually helps us become better, more mindful communicators across cultures and contexts. I would be taking questions now. Does anyone have a question?
Okay, I do.
Okay, Misha, go on.
Mm-hmm. So, how do these accent differences actually affect people who are learning English?
Okay, well, that is a good question. For English learners, whenever they hear different accents, it can be a bit confusing at first, especially when the same word sounds quite different, like what I've mentioned just now, schedule and schedule. Imagine learning water as water and then suddenly hearing water instead of water. So you might not even realize it's the same word because look at how both of them sound so different from each other, but it's the same word. So it can also be Well, I would say tricky when the rhythm or intonation changes the tone of a sentence. But the good news is, the more exposure learners get to different accents, the easier it is to actually understand and adapt. So it's all about building that ear for variation, basically, that space in your mind for different accents. I hope that answers your question, Misha.
Mm, okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. Would anyone else like to ask me a question?
I also have a question for Dania.
Okay, go on, Iman.
Then Dania, why is the letter R is such a big deal when comparing these two accents?
That is a good question. Thank you for the question, Iman. The R or R sound really stands out when you're comparing the two. So I think I have mentioned the rhotic and non-rhotic quite a lot in my presentation just now, right? Because it is such a vital point that I cannot miss out. Basically, in American English, the R is pronounced everywhere. In the British English, especially the RP, it's much softer or even completely dropped at the end of words, like I said just now. For car, in general American, car, it will become car for general British. It's such a small sound, but it changes the whole feel of the accent, right? Plus, it actually affects the rhythm of the sentence too, which is why it's such a big focus when looking at the punctuation differences. So, imagine if general British speakers were to pronounce car as car, wouldn't that actually disrupt the rhythm of their accents? Right? So that is why rhotic and non-rhotic plays such huge role in our presentation today and in this topic for in general. Okay, well, I would like to accept one last question before I start my presentation.
Okay, I have one last question for Danya.
Okay.
So, in your opinion, which accent is more commonly understood around the world?
Okay, that is a good question, Fatin. Thank you very much. I'll try to answer that question without offending any parties, of course. So, it really depends on where you are, actually, and who you're talking to. So, American English is probably more widely heard thanks to, well, the media, the Hollywood, the music, and social media in general. But British English, especially the more formal RP accent, we all know that RP is still considered as prestigious and of the highest quality of all the accents found in the UK. It still has a strong presence in education, business, and places that were once part of the Commonwealth, for example, our country. So that is why our Ministry of Education, they actually emphasize on us following the RP instead of American English. At the end of the day though, both are understood pretty well globally, and it is widely used by just everyone that can speak in English, right? But what matters most is, while being clear and consistent with your pronunciation, no matter which accent you are using. Because if you were to mix both of these accents together, then I think that would create some chaos and confusion. So being consistent would definitely help you being understood by everyone in this world. I hope that answers your question, Fatin.
Yes, thank you, Danya.
Okay, so thank you for the questions just now. I will now end my presentation here. Thank you very much.